Hi, everyone. This is the acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and these are your sun and rising sign horoscopes for the month of May 2020. In this video, we're going to take a look at the water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, and give you a sense of what's going on. I recommend taking a look at these for your rising sign in particular, because that's the horoscope that's going to line up with your birth chart. But some people get a lot of mileage out of looking at their sun signs, so you can look at that too. And the basic difference is that when you're doing a sun sign horoscope, you're just imagining that you're taking the whole sign house of your sun sign, that was Cancer or Scorpio or whatever it might be, and putting it in the first whole sign house, and then all the transits play out through the wheel according to that sign being on the first house. So it's a more divinatory predictive technique. I personally think the rising sign works better, so that's my advice, but I always like hearing your feedback anyway, so tell me what you think. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start off by looking at Cancer, and the first 5 days of the month is really the story of Venus in Gemini moving through the square to Neptune in Pisces. So let's give you a look at that right away. So the first 5 days of the month, May 1st through about the 5th, Venus is moving through the square to Neptune, and the two of them are coming across the 12th and 9th house axis if you're a Cancer, Sun, Cancer rising. So the basic meaning of Venus square Neptune has a lot to do with romance, love, beauty, and then infusing those themes, those Venusian themes, with the transcendental, mystical, but sometimes illusory qualities of Neptune. And we're doing that across two houses that also have a lot to do with mysticism. The 9th house, where Neptune is located, if you're a Cancer rising, is the house that was traditionally called God, the joy of the sun. It was related to the higher mind, to religion and priests and priestesses and mysticism, and even foreign countries or long journeys or something like that. So then we take Venus and we look at Venus in the 12th house. Now, Venus in the 12th house can bring up some of the more difficult sort of, the 12th house is sort of the dark night of the soul house. And so you're looking at potentially some of the shadows involved in love, relationships, beauty, sexuality, even friendships. And so when you look at that kind of deeper, heavier examination of Venusian themes happening this month for Cancers, and this is due in large part, by the way, to the fact that Venus is going to retrograde this month in your 12th house, and you square it to Neptune in the 9th house, and you're also looking at questions about faith and friendship, faith and love, learning and relationships. You're also potentially looking at questions about art, beauty, sensuality or sexuality, and its relationship to faith or higher learning or even foreign places in the world. So some deeper themes that Cancers are working through all month long relative to love and relationships with Venus in the 12th house, but there's a real sort of mystical spiritual twist that's there due to Neptune in the 9th, or again, perhaps relating it some way to education or foreign countries or something like that. You're going to notice those themes really strong the first 5-6 days of the month. Let's call it even the first week of the month. Then I'm going to work through this before I do anything else. I want to work through this for the whole month just to show you how it works. If you go forward to the 13th and 14th of the month, then you're going to see Mercury, Venus turning retrograde, still within only about 1 degree of a square to Neptune. So at that point, you're going to notice that those Venusian themes, especially love, relationships, sexuality, friendship, even the topic of sisters, women, girls, Venusian topics in general, art, beauty, are going to become really amplified as Venus is starting to turn and shift directions. She's making a statement of some kind in your life, and you're really going to notice it right around the middle of the month, May 13th and 14th. And then later in the month, we take it forward to the last part of the month. When you get up to about the about the 22nd into the 23rd, then you're going to notice that Mercury is getting together with Venus, and both are going to be square to Neptune. So this square to Neptune is truly an all month long thing. It's probably the most important part of your horoscope this month. And then Mercury and Venus getting together between the 22nd and 23rd. And then on the 22nd, the other thing that's happening, which you can see at the exact same time, is a new moon forming in Gemini in your 12th house. So this 12th house theme is really important. The 12th house has to do with the stuff that we have to look at that's either self-destructive or self-defeating, that's in the shadows or the secret, that undermines us, anything ranging from gossip or problems or issues or secrets in relationships sometimes, or with friends or siblings, and so forth. You can, I say siblings because Venus and Mercury together will often represent sort of, cousins, siblings, close friends, people who are more like siblings, especially in the sign of the twins, Gemini. A new moon in that 12th house can also mean that you're in a transitional space. The 12th house was called Metacosmios, can mean that you're going through some kind of transition between this new moon in late May and, say, late June around the summer solstice. The summer solstice, things should start to clear up significantly for you, but there is this kind of in-between space that you're going through where there could be some forms of loss or deeper work, especially, again, with friends or lovers or different kinds of relationships. But there's a real spiritual side to this. And Mercury is going to bring with it the messages that are really important to you, and information that's really important to you right around this time of the 22nd and 23rd as well. So that's like the big story of your month. Now I want to go backwards and highlight a couple of other days that I think are going to be really important for you. First of all, watch for a really nice kind of, I almost want to call it like a surprise piece of clarity or good news right around May 4th, as Mercury is Cazimi in your 11th house, perhaps from a group or friends or allies. Something happening there that looks really beneficial in the way of friends or partners or loved ones, and some good fortune. Mercury Cazimi with the sun in the 11th house of allies and friends should have something good to give you around that time, I think. If you go to May 7th, we have the full moon in Scorpio in the 5th house. If you have kids, there could be some difficult circumstances around your children at that time that are a little bit more intense. But also the 5th house themes in general about can range from the topic of pleasure, fun, sexuality. You can also have something to do with the topic of pregnancy can come up. It's also about what makes you unique, what makes you you, what makes you a creative, autonomous individual, as opposed to how you may need to fit in to groups. This is coming across the 5th and the 11th house axis. So you're thinking about, how to be and do yourself, as well as feeling the pressure of needing to fit in or do something within the larger context of groups or communities that you're a part of. And sometimes that tension will be quite pronounced when the moon is in Scorpio, especially where it's in its fall. It's a little Marsy, so you got potentially a little aura of emotional conflict or intensity right around that time. Now, when you go to May 9th to the 11th, right after that, the intensity is still there a little bit, because right at that time, we're going to see Mercury coming out of the Cazimi with the sun and moving into a square with Mars. So this could again bring up some, because Mercury is in the 11th house of friends, squaring Mars in the 8th house, which can be a little bit heavy. Conflicts of value, conflicts of interest, and analytical or more critical energies mentally. It could be a good thing in terms of solving problems or coming up with strategies or plans, taking action, and having strong will, strong mind, but could be difficult in terms of just the degree of intensity and conflict that might be present. So those are some dates for you to think about, in addition to the Venus retrograde and all of the dynamic action with Venus this month. The other one date you might want to pay attention to, just one more, is between the 12th and the 13th. Mars is going to enter Pisces and move into your 9th house, the house of higher mind, religion, spirituality. Again, just adds a little bit more of that sense of being on a mission, or almost like to call Mars in the 9th house like a Joan of Arc energy coming into the spiritual house, the higher learning house. So, don't be surprised if this month has a lot to do with the higher mind, learning, faith, religion, and that if it steps up a little bit in intensity as the month goes on. Now, let's wind this back up and do it over again for Scorpio. So we're going to go back to about the beginning of the month, and let's just put Scorpio on the ascendant. So for Scorpio, we're looking at the same dynamics all month long, from um, primarily from Venus in Gemini to Neptune in Pisces. And I'll go through all of the dates again as we go. But the same energy of Venus and Neptune, which has so much to do with you're combining the topics of faith, mysticism, and mystery, illusion and fantasy, transcendence and imagination. And you're blending those with the planet that's associated with romance, love, beauty, friendship, sexuality, art, romance. And so the combination of those themes this month is very strong because Venus is within a square to Neptune all month long. In your eighth house and fifth house, it's interesting because the eighth house has a lot to do with debts that we owe people or that other people owe us. And the fifth house has a lot to do with fun, pleasure, and recreation and joy, things that bring us joy and happiness that we like to do. And they're more leisurely in the fifth house, or more creative in nature. And so Venus's square to Neptune here might have something to do with differing ideals or values in your relationships, especially when it comes to, pleasure. For example, I'm with a partner who likes to spend money or party, and I'm thriftier, and I don't like to go out as much, or something like that. Those kinds of value distinctions in terms of what I personally need to have fun or to experience joy or happiness or pleasure or creativity, and where that harmonizes well with other people that I'm close to, or where there is dissonance. And also, how porous or suggestible am I? Am I in someone else's stage play, or am I in my own? Am I doing what other people want me to do, or am I really finding happiness in what I'm doing? Those kinds of questions can be really important. There can also be some question about benefiting from other people, and being really careful that you're not used or being used, or using someone, I should say, because the exchange between Venus and Neptune in these two places can sometimes have something to do with being taken advantage of or taking advantage of someone else. This can also have something to do with the dissolution of relationships because you're coming to see them for what they are, or the potential to be taken up in fantasies based on really, it's like if you ever go out and you're on a date with someone, and maybe you've had a couple of drinks, it colors your perception of the other person. So illusion and disillusionment around how much I actually enjoy or love something, or how much it actually gives me. Those could also be real themes and topics for Scorpios this month. Now, the Scorpio rising in particular. So then Venus is going to turn retrograde around the 13th and the 14th. That's going to intensify that dynamic. And then again around the 22nd and 23rd, I'm just going to bring it up to date so you can see this. Mercury is going to get in on the action. And right at that time, you've got a new moon as well. So here's Mercury and Venus getting in on the square to Neptune together, as Venus is now retrograde, and then a new moon in Gemini, all in the 8th house. So the theme or topic of other people's money, other people's debts or obligations to others, or things that other people need or want from you, that kind of soul contract stuff this month is big for Scorpios, as well as, again, the question of pleasure, fun, beauty. Also, if you have kids, the karma around children could be really notable this month, meaning that it's not just your average month with your kids. It's really hard to say what it would mean specifically because we're forecasting for a huge group of people, right? But the idea is themes around sacrifice, need, loss, trying to be supportive. For example, wouldn't be surprised at all if it was like, yeah, my kid needs a loan this month, or something like that. Okay, so at any rate, that will all intensify around May 22nd and 23rd. So let's back it up and look at some other really important dates for Scorpios this month, going back to May 4th. Now, when I look at the 4th, again, I see the Mercury cazimi, and I go, that looks pretty good in your seventh house of love relationships, for there to be some empowerment in that area of your life, a partner getting a job or getting good news or something good happening for a partner, or empowered speech within a relationship, getting to the core essence of something and solving a problem, or just kind of empowered communication dynamics in relationships. It looks good. Or you could meet someone on that day that would really speak to your soul somehow. Now, the other thing is that on the 7th, we're going to have a full moon, and the full moon is going to be in your home sign. That's really interesting because what it's doing is it's drawing out a tension that exists this month between your home sign and the seventh house of relationships. So the question around the full moon is, how much of me and how much of we? Do I want to be independent, or am I in a relationship with someone that I really want to be in? Or maybe I should work a little bit better on becoming, cooperative and dependent, and seeing myself in terms of a relationship, because I tend to be too independent or too individualistic. But whatever the balance might be, for you personally, the tension between self and other will be really highlighted around the full moon on the 7th. It also involve your health with the full moon in Scorpio in its fall in the first house. Take good care of yourself this month, because it's a little bit of a difficult full moon to have in your first house. Now, if you go to the 9th into the 11th, from the 9th to the 11th, Mercury will get into a square with Mars from the 7th to the 4th. Watch out for some degree of conflict, communication conflicts, or some degree of communicative or verbal or mental intensity, especially around home, parents, family, and lovers or relationships. Could be a little bit of an intense moment there, but also really good problem solving energy, really good critical thinking energy, and action oriented energy. So you can really think, plan, and execute well right around that time. That's the 9th to the 11th. So that is what I've got. Oh, one more, which is just the entrance of Mars into Pisces. Now, that entrance of Mars into Pisces happening right around the 12th into the 13th of the month. That happens in your 5th house. So, I could see people, like, the 5th house is a pretty fun place, but it also, when Mars enters that place, it gets a little more, what I want to say, your desire body is going to become more intense and demanding. So watch for that to increase a little bit around that time. And also potential for more conflicts or challenges around children to step up around that time. Okay, so that is what I've got for Scorpios this month. Let's roll it back and do it all over again for our Pisces rising. I'm just going to go back to like the beginning of the month, and let's put Pisces on the ascendant. Excuse me. So putting Pisces on the ascendant, this is interesting because now we have that Venus-Neptune dynamic falling in the angular places. All the mutable signs this month, if you're a mutable rising sign especially, you're really getting rocked from this Venus retrograde dynamic, because it happens in angular houses, and those houses are the busiest and most dynamic. A word that ancient Greek astrologers used was krematistikos, for busy places, which meant that those places, when planets were in them, they had the power to act and speak and really sort of took center stage. So Venus, of course, goddess of love, relationships, beauty, desire, to a certain degree, the arts, and even friendships, harmony. And she's in the 4th house of home, family, and parents, if you're a Pisces rising, and square to Neptune in the 1st house. So if you are feeling at all overwhelmed by your living situation this month, and you feel like you're going crazy or losing yourself a little bit, the dynamic should, that I could totally see it, but the dynamic should shift as the month goes on, because Venus is retrograde in the 4th house later in the month, between the 13th and the 14th, suggests some kind of existential moment about who I am, what is important to me, and it's specifically in relationship to your house of home, family, parents, your living situation. So it should be interesting, again, because so many people are quarantined right now as well. I would anticipate that there could be some Pisceans who are moving or rearranging their house or changing the energy in their home somehow, or dealing with potentially some challenging relationship issues if you're living with someone, or even family members going through some challenging things. Now, I don't think they'll be the worst in the world, but they could be sort of confounding and overwhelming emotionally with Neptune in your 1st house. Or you could be going through this space of just kind of questioning who you are in relation to where you live, or in relation to family karmic patterns that are sort of being revealed to you this month. So watch for that. That's the big news of the month. Now, towards the end of the month, this dynamic is all amplified quite a bit because we're going to see, let's see here, back this up just a little bit. Right around the 22nd into the 23rd, we're going to see a new moon in Gemini plus Mercury and Venus going into one more square with Neptune. So basically that square between Venus and Neptune is present all month long. Mercury gets in on the action, sort of amplifying it. And then there's a new moon in Gemini in your fourth house. So something really new happening around the topics of home, family, parents, property, land, stuff like that. And the nice thing is that the new moon there suggests that this retrograde is going to bring some really new chapter. I mean, I would think anything from adding a family member, like getting pregnant or having kids, to moving or relocating or something happening with roommates, or there being changes in the family somehow. I would think of them as being revisions potentially because of the upcoming Mercury retrograde in Cancer, which is the moon sign, and may also emphasize topics around home and family. So for Pisces, I think it's home and family month for you, but it could really bring it back to, questions about who you are and your sense of life direction or purpose as well, being quite personal with Neptune squaring from the first house. All right, so some other dates this month that stand out, going back again to basically the beginning of the month, around the 5th. And when we look at that, we have the cazimi between the Sun and Mercury in your third house. I would think of that being a really good day, like if you're going to buy a new car, because I know interest rates are low right now, or a new piece of technology, or you're making something or building your website, or something around communication, technology, media, travel, could be emphasized very positively with Mercury cazimi in that sign. But it could also mean that, that there is something essential that you need to express or communicate, or that you might be receiving an important message on that day. So watch for that. Meanwhile, there's also on the 7th, another big transit, and that is the full moon in Scorpio. So that's going to land in your 9th house. And now there's this interesting tension being created between the 3rd and the 9th, two places that both have to do with the mind, the intellect, and learning, but one that has more to do with almost like the laws of the cosmos, of doctrines and dogmas, of the immutable laws of karma or physics, that kind of high, lofty, sort of structured knowledge in the 9th house, versus the individual relativistic person and their individual realizations or their expression of knowledge through their own unique personality. That's how I like to think about the 9th and the 3rd sometimes. And so the transit here may have something to do with looking at your beliefs, looking at faith, looking at higher learning, trying to understand the higher purpose, order, or meaning of something, but also feeling this tension pulling in the opposite direction. So how do I communicate something? How do I embody something? How do I embody my beliefs in the world? But also just intellectual themes or learning and spirituality in general could be emphasized around the full moon. Maybe with a little tinge of conflict with the moon in its fall in Scorpio in that 9th house. There could be some drama, especially around religion, higher beliefs, and so forth. So when we go forward from there, from the 9th to the 11th, there's going to be a Mercury Mars square. You can see that coming in from Taurus to Aquarius, from your 3rd to your 12th house. Again, I would look at the potential for there to be a more incisive, executive, mental quality to this. It's energetic, it's smart, but it's also earthy and practical. If I were building something, this would be a good day to draft the blueprints. If you're planning something, now is a good day to draft the plan and execute. So it has that feeling of being very solid, very intelligent, and very action-oriented. On the other hand, it could also be in some ways overly critical, rigid, or mentally combative. So watch for those energies right around that time. Be careful of not being overly impulsive mentally or verbally as well. Then we go from on the 12th into the 13th. Mars is going to enter your home sign. If you're looking for something to motivate you to, I don't know, start running, I guess, in your neighborhood, or to, because I'm pretty sure gyms are still closed, but Mars in the first house is energizing. It can also mean, if you get a headache or fever, or something like you're just spiking potentially your immune sensitivity or something like that. Mars in the first house can be a little oppressive when it comes to health, but it can also be very energizing when it comes to our bodies, especially. So, if you're someone who needs to get up or needs to take better care of yourself, Mars will give you that energy. Take the incentive of Mars being there. Don't wait until you get sick to have the bell rung and being like, hey, you need to get up. And I'm not talking about anything super serious. Mars goes through, a lot of people's first houses, but this is just one of the things that Mars can do in the first house. It's known for accidents, injuries, fevers, head problems, increased health problems in general is Mars in the first house, but it's also associated with things like taking action, taking incentive, feeling stronger in your body, gonna get a little bit of giddy up behind it. So not the worst thing in the world. Okay, so that's what I've got. I think I've gone through everything. Yep, that's everything. So I would love to hear from all of you water signs. Tell me how your month is going. As we go, come back, re-listen to it. And be sure you also check out my overview for the month of May. Lots of things coming. So I look forward to unpacking things with you one transit at a time. Take it easy.